Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. That's right. We're talking about Terror in the Aisles for its 40th anniversary on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from a movie theater someplace. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. And we're going to unpack all the goriest details of the clip show that is Terror in the Aisles, in the hopes that an audience member's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust to hold on to that joint for me in her popcorn bucket. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
When we're in this sleazy, disgusting, smoky, sticky floored movie theater.
It really does look grimy. And I worked overtime on research on this particular episode, probably because there's no plot to really recount. And I could not find the actual filming location of this. It might have been created, which I would think would be more money than they wanted to put into it. But it sure looks like the Aero Theater in Santa Monica, but I can't say that for certain. I just going by the symbol on the door back there. But I don't know where this takes place, but it definitely looks skeezy.
I mean, you could smell it through the screen.
What they do not tell you is that Terror in the Aisles comes in Centovision. But of course, Gina, before we smell trouble brewing, I don't want to alarm you, but we are not alone. That's right. We have a special guest. You know him as a comedian, a filmmaker, and the man behind Kevin Geeks Out. But most importantly, he's a returning champion here to Kill by Kill, the one, the only Kevin Maher. How are you doing today, Kevin?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
It is a pleasure to have you back on board after a little bit of a hiatus, and talking about one of the most important artifacts in all of horror cinema. And I say that acknowledging that a significant portion of this film's clip collection comes from what one could argue is not a horror film at all, NIGHTHAWKS.
Why did it talk about NIGHTHAWKS so much?
This is going to kind of become a NIGHTHAWKS episode simply because the volume of attention the movie gives it. Like, it only says the title of one film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But you would think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre takes place in New York City in the early 80s and Sylvester Stallone is on the case. That's the impression the movie gives you. Kevin, when was the first time you saw Terror in the Aisles?
I probably would have seen it on cable, or maybe I rented it. So I was at an impressionable age, somewhere between like 12 and 14. Mm-hmm. I would have watched it at home. It's weird to think about seeing this film in a movie theater. I don't know. I want to know, how did the two of you see it?
Gina?
This was during a period where I was staying with my grandparents a lot. And so there was a very old school mom and pop run video store down the street, the kind that had the beaded curtain in the back. We knew where that went to.
A sign of quality.
Yes. And I just sort of spotted this one day, and I'm like, this looks interesting. And so I rented it. I took it home, and then I proceeded to rent it over and over and over again for about a year straight. I must have been probably about 13 or 14. Mm-hmm. And yeah, this was, I had already been a horror fan for a while, but then this was like, all right, this is basically like, not knowing at the time that roughly 90% of the feature movies were Universal movies.
Yeah.
I basically thought of it as like a primer of movies that I needed to catch up on.
It's an entree into a bunch of movies that otherwise you might not have known. This is a very pre-internet existence here in 1984. This premiered the same week as the movie we covered last week, The Terminator. It came in number 2, but only off by a couple, I think $20,000 is the difference between The Terminator and Terror in the Isles. So it was doing box office. Number 3, Body Double, Gina.
Oh man, what a week.
This is a rockin' week at the box office. How do you even decide between The Terminator, Terror in the Isles, and Body Double? Very different movies, all with very confused sexual identities. I personally saw it well after the fact on cable. I saw it both in its theatrical form on things like HBO and its TV version form, which is different. It is just a different movie. It is lifting things out wholesale and putting other things in. And I would say the big difference between the two of them is the actual theme of the motion picture. According to the theatrical version, it's about audience reactions to predominantly horror films and a bunch of different thrillers to kind of fill it out.
You know, terror films.
Terror films, exactly, as it's described.
That's what they call it in the movie. You know, that phrase we all use when we talk about what sort of movies do you guys cover on Kill by Kill podcast? What do you talk about on your show?
Mainly terror films, a moniker that is definitely caught on.
Oh, I love terror films.
Terror films and NIGHTHAWKS.
At one point, a concept for a season of the show would be to have covered every movie in Terror in the Isles in which it appeared in Terror in the Isles. And we would have eventually been forced to do a NIGHTHAWKS season. And my wife called that really dumb. So I did not propose that any further than running it past her.
I have seen all but one of the movies featured in this. I made a point to do so at some point.
I'm gonna take a guess. And Patrick, you should guess as well, because you know Gina better than I do. This is like a weird version of the Newlywed Game where we have to guess which one film Gina has not seen.
Go for it.
I'm going to say from 1957, The Deadly Mantis.
No, I have seen that.
Oh.
All right, my second choice was Nightwing.
No, we did.
We've covered Nightwing.
We did an episode of
sorry.
Nightwing.
Boy, am I. Should have quit while I was behind.
I am flustered as to what it could possibly be, because I'm going to assume you've seen things like The Eyes of Laura Mars.
Yes.
Yeah. I really don't know.
Hold That Ghost?
Oh, yeah.
No, I've never seen Ms. 45.
Oh, probably because it's not easy to fucking see.
Well,
it's a big one.
It's that, and I'm just not a particularly big fan of rape revenge movies. So it was a conscious decision to not seek that one out. I'm like, you know what? Because this is another one they show a lot from this. I'm like, I think I've got the gist.
She dresses up as a nun. She's got cool lipstick.
She gets raped twice in the same day. I think I've got the idea here.
Yeah, I have seen the movie, and it's one of my favorite Death Wish movies. It sadly does not contain a character named the Giggler, though. That's Death
does
Wish.
it have Jeff Goldblum in a Jughead hat?
It does not. That would be the original Death Wish. Which begs the question, Gina, would we ever cover the Death Wish movies on Kill by Kill?
I mean, the only one that's any fun is one where he just kills a guy with a rocket launcher.
Yeah. I believe that is 3, the one with the Giggler, where everyone mourns the passing of the Giggler.
Oh, man, he got the Giggler.
He got the Giggler, man. Oh, boy. So, yes, it was a big checklist movie for me, because while I had heard about a fair amount of these movies, at the time I had seen it, I had barely seen any of them. I'd certainly seen Jaws, and I might have seen NIGHTHAWKS, another film that played on a loop on HBO at one point. But when it came to a lot of the slasher movies on display, and Poltergeist, But a lot of the, real horror movies I had not seen, and certainly much fewer of the classics on display. The, your black and white motion pictures that are dot the landscape in this montage of quote unquote terror films. So before we go any further, I guess, this is the kind of thing that lights a horror fan's fire at a certain point. This is primer. This is what you put into a pile of logs to start a fire and make it really rage. I'm assuming the same thing happened for the both of you.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, I had seen some of the movies featured, but it just I don't know. It just, maybe it's because they made it seem like, watching a horror movie was something degenerates did.
Yes.
and for some reason I felt a sick little thrill from that. This is something weird people do.
I feel like, Kevin, this is something that would be almost a theme for Kevin Geeks Out in and of itself, which is the movie's idea of what a horror movie fan is. Because for the vast majority of the 80s, it is, you might be the worst person alive.
Yeah, I think representation is definitely something I'm interested in at the Kevin Geeks Out show. So going into this, was trying to think about pre-1984, what were some of the depictions of horror fans in pop culture? And Salem's Lot, you got the kid in Salem's Lot. The kid in
Monster
the fun
Kids.
house. Yeah, Monster Kid in the fun house. I'm going to count Robbie in Poltergeist. He has an alien poster up in his bedroom. So I'm going to count Robbie from Poltergeist. Later in the 80s, you get Chainsaw and Dave. You get Morgan Stewart's Coming Home. You get the creepy, weird guy who's the horror movie fan comic relief in the movie Moving Violations. There's lots of horror movie fans that are depicted after this film. But before 1984, there wasn't a ton of representation. And I don't think it typically would have come up on sitcoms where there's somebody who walks into the room who's wearing, a John Carpenter t-shirt or something. It might come out that somebody likes, I don't know, old Universal monster movies maybe, but I don't think a character who is defined by their horror fandom, or I'm sorry, their terror film fandom would have been as dominant. So it's interesting. And I think when we talked before recording about what some of the focus was going to be, I immediately remembered a couple of characters, and then watching it this time, it's like, oh, there's some squares in there too. There's some professor types. There's some, average moviegoers besides, the degenerates. But there's a lot of degenerates too.
There's a guy that comes in that's looking at people like he's sizing up who he's going to kill in the parking lot after the
wearing sunglasses in a dark theater.
Yeah, in a movie theater.
Although
not a good sign.
Probably needed the sunglasses because that audience is so overlit. On the Blu-ray, it's like, wow, there's no attempt to make Donald Pleasence seem like he's in a darkened theater. Everybody is overexposed.
Everyone, it looks like they're looking into Giant Stadium during a game.
Yeah,
and it's just supposed to be a dark room with one bright wall. There's the guy who's unshaven with the beard, sunglasses, who I believe probably paid a lot of attention to the handkerchief monologue from Cruising, Gina.
Either that or Mickey Rourke's popcorn box trick in Diner.
Sure.
Yes. He's deceptively cutting holes into all sorts of popcorn boxes. He's definitely walking in. You're surprised it's not funneling out the bottom. Then there are the two Latino stereotypes who are constantly smoking weed, who I think the vast majority of people might conflate with how Cheech and Chong are their bits from It Came From Hollywood.
I was going to say, there was also, I don't even want to call it the lesser movie, just different in tone, but probably not as remembered as much today, but they came out roughly the same time.
It Came From Hollywood came out 2 years before, and there are just a couple of things that are in common. Both films kind of end with a little musical montage.
Right.
Kind of
and they
wrap
kind
it up.
Right. And It Came from Hollywood definitely focuses more on like low budget movies of the 50s and 60s. And there the tone is much more lighthearted, it's much more silly, but you've still got like, people in the audience reacting to things, and it's mostly people from SCTV for some reason. But here it's just like, there's a little sus about going to see a horror movie. This is an experience for people that might be a little weird.
Just because you brought up It Came from Hollywood, I have to bring up two things. One,
Sure.
The Kevin Geeks Out show itself probably wouldn't exist without It Came from Hollywood and Terror in the Aisles. It was so influential for the existence of
I could
the Kevin
definitely
Geeks
I
Out
could see that.
video variety show where different people share around a theme. That was important. Oh, I'm sorry. Three things. Second thing about It Came from Hollywood, a projectionist told me, and that's how you know this is like good information. It's coming from a projectionist, okay? A projectionist told me that originally there was a cut of It Came from Hollywood with no hosted wraparounds. It was done in the style of Joe Dante's The Movie Orgy, which was an unreleased montage film. And I guess someone had the idea that they could make a version of it that they would release in theaters. But that, I guess, didn't play. So they kind of restructured, recut the film and brought in, Cheech and Chong and Gilda Radner, Dan Aykroyd, and John Candy to appear in hosted bits to liven it up a little. And then the third thing I want to mention is there are two films that appear in both Terror in the Aisles and It Came from Hollywood. Can you name either of the two films?
Ooh.
I think wasn't one of them wasn't The Fly in both of them?
Yes, The Fly is one of them. I'm very impressed.
Gina.
I'm very impressed.
One.
Well, I don't know the other one. He said there were two. I don't think I know the other one.
I assume one of the I assume the man with two heads.
Yes, the thing with two heads. You guys got it. Give yourselves a round of applause.
Invisible high five.
I seem to remember the monkey with
two
gorilla.
heads.
I'm not sure
heads.
what it is. With two heads eating a banana in a convenience store.
Rick Baker plays the two-headed gorilla in the thing with two heads.
A film I was forced to watch because I was a giant Elvira fan. And of course, she had the worst selection of horror films of all time. It's not to say that those films did not scare me, as The Incredible Melting Man scared the living shit out of me at one point in my life. So I revisited that film many years later and I was like, what was my problem? Was the idea of The Incredible Melting Man so potent that my imagination just got carried away with me? Had I never seen anything remotely gory? I'm not sure. It was on at 4:00 in the afternoon. Nothing should scare you at 4:00 in the afternoon. I love It Came from Hollywood, despite, some bits that probably have not aged very well. That being said, I think what It Came from Hollywood does that this film has some trouble with is celebration. There's a lot of excuse making in Terror in the Aisles. Sometimes the things that we think aren't so great. And then they make movies out of them. And then these scuzzballs show up and watch them. And then Donald Pleasence is like, really, it's an excuse to grab your date, if you brought one.
But we know you didn't.
All the single people here are masturbators, including me and Nancy Allen, I guess. It's a weird flex. we've only hit once. Oh, actually, we've hit 3/4 of the scuzzballs. So you've got the guy in the mirrored sunglasses who definitely is masturbating at some point. You've got the two Latino stereotypes who are just hogging popcorn, smoking dope, and assaulting women. And then you've got one guy who only shows up once, who's kind of like a Travis Bickle Jr.
Absolutely.
Who's just looking for people to shoot. I don't know what he represents, but it's not me. He's got bad skin and a badder attitude.
In the wide shot, he's holding a copy of Catcher in the Rye.
Exactly.
He's just sneaking peeks at that picture of Jodie Foster in his wallet.
I mean, he's holding that book, but it's also upside down. So you kind of wonder.
Yeah.
Then you have your two hosts, and then everyone else in the audience appears to have just walked out of Easter services because they are all wearing pastels. Every single one of them is wearing a yellow, a pink, or a blue pastel, and they could not be neater or cleaner, but they are also overacting within an inch of their lives. They have never seen a horror movie, nevertheless a movie. Like if they showed them that train pulling into the station, they would probably leap out of their seats. I just have a hard time believing they're watching The Seduction, Gina.
Yeah, that was a, well, I mean, maybe not. I mean, remember there was, back in time where people would just show up at a movie theater and say, and be like, well, I guess we'll see what's playing next. Right. Oh, The Seduction. That sounds interesting.
Well, I do like Morgan. She's a great gal. Let's see what's happening in this. Oh, a lot of jacuzzis going on here.
Is the implication that this is like one of the last democratic shared spaces that people that would never normally sit side by side when they want to go see Midnight Express? This is going to bring them all together.
Another well-known horror movie.
Another well-known terror film.
A film that has a lot of terrors in it. Very few of them I would describe as horror, but also not particularly pleasant. But, and probably the only sex in the shower scene that I'll put my stamp of approval behind. Where else are you going to handle your business in a Turkish prison, honestly? So yeah, and like I said on the show before, this was like a springboard for a lot of movies where I was like, I don't know what that is, but I want to find out. Like this was the place where I saw the Fury amusement park scene and I was like, I don't know what the fuck that is.
Yeah, that was a big standout scene for me too. I definitely remember seeing that. I was like, what is this?
You don't see a lot of Arab sheiks get thrown into a Shakey's very often. That's rare.
I mean, I think that might be the only time.
Can't we bring that back as a thing?
Other filmmakers are like, you know what? Don't mess with perfection. It's been done. De Palma showed us all how it's done, and now we all have to just move on.
I mean, I throw it into an MCU movie, but they're gonna like, it's been done. You're just copying the master. And then I think there are two other people that we definitely need to talk about from this audience just before we go any further. And they show up in these host segments in which Donald Pleasence and Nancy Allen talk directly to camera. The first person appears behind Donald Pleasence, appears to be wearing some sort of Popeye the Sailor Man cap. He is fully bearded and looking straight into the camera. No one else is. Half the time, Donald Pleasence isn't. He's looking at cue cards. But this guy, who is blurred in the background, is definitely going, it's my time to shine, baby. Like no one looked into the camera at any point during the filming of this and going, this asshole is looking right into camera. We got to move him.
It's like, we're going to bring Donald back and do this shot again.
Well, they couldn't bring any of them back because here's the deal. both segments were filmed in a day. They shot out Donald and then they shot out Nancy Allen, who revealed in an interview one of the reasons she signed up for this movie was to meet Donald Pleasence, and shows up to set. And everyone's like, oh, no, we shot him out yesterday. This is your day. We got one day to do this. So she's like, I guess I'll meet him at some point. But yeah, there was, I don't know that care into filming these audience sequences was high up on the ranks of priority.
The editing is the star of the film.
It is. It is. It absolutely is. Nothing having to do with the audience, but all of the clips and how they create a consistent mood through most of them. I won't say all, but most of them have a real feel. Like they're giving you the mood of unease, of growing terror, of being out of control, all the things you want in an early 80s horror movie. This film is trying to give you in terms of mood. And it's also a juggling act in terms of its music, because so much of the clips have music tied into them that they couldn't remove, that they had to either take that music, license it, and string it throughout multiple clips, or suddenly replace that music with something that sounded a lot like it. Like there's a couple times in here where they're using actual Halloween music and then someone's doing a John Carpenter theme off of that.
Yeah, just if any listeners haven't seen the film, when we say Halloween music, we're talking about the score from Halloween, not Monster Mash.
Yeah.
Although that is a cut I would love to see.
I think Monster Mash would be a better than the somewhat corny original song they have at the end for the ending montage. It would give it a nice little jaunty ending.
So I have a question.
Yes.
We all seem to agree this was a great entree, a great gateway to a lot of wonderful terror films. I want to know if it was an issue for you that there are so many spoilers, because we've got The Shining, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Nighthawks, Vice Squad, The Fury. Technically not the ending, but a nice twist in When a Stranger Calls is given away. Would this exist today, or would there be some kind of spoiler? Do you feel it took anything away with your experience of seeing some of these films, knowing what the endings were? And big philosophical question: what is the spoiler statute of limitations?
No. Do you mind if I take this one first, Pat?
No, go for it.
Okay, so that is a really, really good question. And it is hard for me now, looking back, remembering what I had seen before and after this. Now, you had brought up When a Stranger Calls. That was definitely one I had seen afterward. And yeah, I was very much drawn by that great scene. And I was frankly very surprised that is at the beginning of the movie. And also that jack shit happens after that point. It like the as far as I'm concerned, the best bits of that movie is that sequence and that sequence alone. And I could not even tell you what happens the rest of it, because it's just not a very interesting movie.
When a Stranger Calls is kind of the Full Metal Jacket of terror films. It's two movies. Two movies, and the first half hour is really where it's at.
Is a little more compelling. Yes. Now, if this was, this would not work today, because people are so anti-spoiler that you would just you absolutely cannot show any key scenes in, certainly not movies. I would give it around, and this kind of dovetails into your question about a statute of limitations. I think, for me, if it's been out a year, it's fine. You can spoil it. I mean, the way as fast as movies come out to streaming at this point, if you have not seen a certain movie, within a year, too bad if it gets spoiled. You should have seen it sooner if you wanted to know how much, if you want to know what happens that much in it. I think generally before the streaming era, a couple years maybe. But yeah, I think for a movie like this now, you would, to prevent people from complaining, not that terror movie fans are not the biggest complainers God saw fit to put on this earth. You would really have to just not put any sort of big endings at all in any movies, because someone's going to say, hey, you ruined it for people. So yeah, I'm not sure that it would work now, not in the same format, at least.
I think if it were made today, it would basically be Eli Roth's World of Horror or whatever it was called, where it's just a talking head clip show.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There would definitely be way more people talking about their feelings on these movies rather than focusing on the movies themselves. That's fine. It's fine. It gets a little tiresome when you see the same people over and over again, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, this is more, we keep using on the show the word vibe a lot, but this is more of a vibe. You've got here's these kinds of movies, and then 10 minutes of montage, and then it's, here's some movies where there's some naked people, 10 minutes of montage. And then, and they are literally just introducing a montage and not really talking about their feelings on these movies. In fact, I would hazard a guess that 35% of these movies Donald Pleasence had never even seen his entire life.
Yeah, he had no idea what he was talking about. And what he's saying is so general, it could apply to a vast majority of films, which I think they had to do because they could only, get so many of these films licensed. It's, why is it Friday the 13th Part 2 and no Friday the 13th? They only use one shot from the end of Friday the 13th. That is from the last time on Friday the 13th, previously on, that they have in the dream sequence of Alice. So they're not even paying for two movies there. They're like, I don't know, we'll just do it in one, I guess. And a lot of this movie got changed when it first received an X. And they're like, how is this possible? All these movies are rated R or below. And they're like, it's just the cumulative effect. It's too much. It's too intense. And I'm like, that seems weird. So they had to change a bunch of things and lose a bunch of the intensity along the way to appease the MPAA. I just don't think you could license this shit as much. You'd have to make it in clip show form. You can't put it together in montage anymore. And in terms of spoilers, I grew up reading Mad Magazine. Mad Magazine spoiled the shit out of every movie I could not see. It spoiled The Exorcist. It spoiled Rosemary's Baby. It spoiled Alien. It spoiled Outland, another thriller movie or terror movie. I guess, I don't know. They weren't allowed to show that in this. And so, while I would love to go into every movie cold, honestly, you don't know the context for half of what's going on in this movie. Like, I'd never seen Halloween. This was the most Halloween I'd ever seen. So it didn't really affect my ultimate viewing of those films. It just made me want to see them more. Younger generation, like if I showed this to my kid, well, I probably wouldn't, because I'd want him to see these moments in context rather than in random montage.
Yeah, I think that I do wonder, like, if you show this to a younger person, it's like, does this interest you in these movies? Does this make these movies seem like something you'd want to watch? Now, obviously, even someone your son's age, would probably recognize, oh, that's from The Exorcist, or that's from Psycho. I know that movie, even if you actually hadn't seen it, But some of the smaller movies, I wonder, like Nighthawks. Would he want to see Nighthawks?
Or Alone in the Dark, a movie that you could barely see up until a year ago. that would be hard for him to like even know who are those people? Why is that happening? Why does he want that hat? You know, I've seen the movie. I own the movie. I still don't know why he wants that hat.
Because it's a cool hat, Patrick.
Yeah. All right.
It's a mailman's hat. He's got a little bicycle. I would have wanted the bicycle personally, but he wanted the hat.
No, he still wants to drive around in that van with the guy who yells all the time and the somewhat hefty guy who doesn't talk. And they all sit in a row in front of a van. That has got to be the smelliest van of all time. Is those three trucking around upper state New York together? Yeah. And in terms of like, what is the spoiler? I think Gina's right. You know, I think a movie like this thrived in an environment in which home video was just starting. This is, and I honestly, as much of as the other studios who weren't Universal complained about, you're just making money at the movies we produced. This was a teaser for all of those movies. You wanted to see, these movies after they were featured here.
Well, what I thought was interesting was there's a couple of movies that could not have come out very long before this was made. Like Firestarter is in this. And I think Firestarter had to have been less than a year between its release and showing up as a clip in this.
Yeah, I think the reason Firestarter is in there is because Dawn of the Dead had to come out. They just started scrambling for Universal movies that they could shove into this place.
I was wondering why we didn't get Dawn of the Dead. I was making a little mental list of what, sort of like the way hippies talk about the bands that should have been in the Woodstock movie.
Yeah.
I was thinking like
versus Shaun Na.
Yeah. I'm surprised there's no Dawn of the Dead. I'm surprised there's no Don't Look Now, but I'm glad it didn't spoil the ending of Don't Look Now for me.
Right. It would spoil the shit out of that. And what else are you going to put in there? Just like random running around dark alleys of Venice, or I'm so upset that my child just drowned. That's a mood killer right there. Without any context, that is not a fucking fun time.
Yeah, it also did not have, if any Hammer horror. It was all very, with the exception of Suspiria, very American focused.
Yes, and barely any Suspiria. Like, talk about a movie you could show a bunch of random images from that are just frightening as hell. It just cuts the hell out of Suspiria. It's barely in the movie. And then, you get Alfred. Listen, I enjoy hearing Alfred Hitchcock talk. He's a fascinating filmmaker. Certainly you don't get a lot of context from this, but you definitely get the idea that he knows how to build scary sequences from what he's talking about. But there, why is there no My Bloody Valentine? Why is there no Prom Night? Why is there no Amityville Horror? Is another one. Like if you go by actual, release date year, Amityville Horror is the biggest movie of 1979. For some reason, Superman, which got released at Christmas the previous year, is listed as the biggest film of 1979. And while Gina, you and I have plenty of problems with the Amityville Horror, in terms of the zeitgeist, it's one of the biggest horror releases of all time. And they just it doesn't exist.
I'm sorry. We had to make room for 1979's Nightwing.
It is using the best part of Nightwing, though.
The novelty song mentions bats repeatedly in the lyrics. We've got to go with Nightwing.
There were no other Bat movies at the time. Like, if you're putting in Nightwing, why isn't the sleeping bag death from Prophecy in here? That I find just astonishing. But it ultimately came down to each of these studios would only release a certain amount of movies to be featured. And Universal was obviously more, hey, take this, take that, take this, take that. But conversely, they only use stuff from the Funhouse in the TV edit. They don't use it in the theatrical.
When little boy Michael Myers puts on the clown mask, I got confused and I thought I was watching the Funhouse. I thought I was watching the Funhouse's homage to Halloween or ripoff of Halloween.
I always forget that she's singing that weird ass fucking song. And then when she notices Michael's in the room, she goes, Michael! It's like, this is one of the scariest movies of all time and a legitimate fucking masterpiece. But also, there's some goofy ass shit in that movie. And when you remove it from the rest of the film, like, hey, Lonnie, get your ass out of there. In the TV version, for some reason, they change his voice to really high to cover up ass. So, Lonnie, get your ass, get out of there. You're like, is he Speedy Gonzalez? Why is he talking that way? One of the odder elements of this is the fact that it just decides to have a sequence which is like time for boobs.
Well, yeah, and then they try to tie it into, oh, well, you know, when you're most vulnerable when you're naked. it's like, yeah.
Uh-huh. That's true.
I can't argue with there, Nancy Allen.
And I've been naked in a lot of this, but not this movie because I decided no. So they don't have permission from Audrey Hepburn to use her image or her voice. So someone fills in for Audrey Hepburn at one point, and there's another like, who the fuck is that? How can you have
right?
That movie and not have any Audrey Hepburn in it at all? The best part of that movie is the sequence that completely goes black and you're just hearing her scream. It's fucking amazing. It's a lot of monologues until then, but that's why it's a good play.
Well, yeah, I just did not know that they didn't use her voice.
Yeah. I mean, there's no Mid-Atlantic coming from whoever is filling in for her. I'll tell you that. And then the Nighthawks of it all. They show that movie.
It's like half the movie.
They're like, hold on, everybody. We're going to give you Nighthawks for dummies. We're just going to reduce it down to 5 solid fucking minutes.
Well, it's like, it feels almost like a promotional reel for a movie that came out 3 years earlier.
Right. But you can't believe how intense Nighthawks is. And then I'm remembering, like, I don't think it's that good of a movie. I mean, as much as I enjoy seeing Sylvester Stallone in a blonde wig pull a gun out of a sink wrapped in plastic wrap.
What was the movie we just talked about recently where we referenced that scene?
I feel like we reference it all the time, Gina.
No, it was specifically the coming up behind somebody wearing a blonde wig, and we were both hoping that it would be Sylvester Stallone.
We were desperately hoping that they had inserted Nighthawks era Sylvester Stallone into this movie to shoot somebody in the chest.
It was just recently too. Yeah. I can't remember what it was though.
Were you doing an episode on the opening credit sequence of Three's Company when Larry gets into the bumper car with the blonde and then he gets shot by Sylvester Stallone in a blonde wig?
I mean, that would be a very different show, but absolutely a show I would have watched. If every episode someone had been shot by Sylvester Stallone in a blonde wig.
Now, here's something I noticed this time just watching Terror in the Aisles.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Sylvester Stallone or was it the director who said, okay, so the cop's going to put the gun on the bad guy. This is it. This is the big finish. He's going to shoot him. Was it the director or was it Stallone who said, I think my character would take the wig off first?
Just want you to know, it was me the whole time.
Well, yeah. Kevin, we've covered a couple Sly films over the course of this 8-year journey we've been on with Kill by Kill. And what we know about Sly at this point is subtlety. He is, at his core, he knows exactly what his character is. For example, in Cobra, he has a gun with a snake on the hilt of it that he puts in his pants so it looks like a little penis. Very few actors, know the connection between a gun and a penis. And he's like, what if I made it like the point of the movie? It's very rare. Some of the other actors in the background of this movie, the ones that I really love, are the ones that Donald Pleasence interrupts after the alien chestburster scene, in which he says, "That was very shocking, wasn't it?" One of them, again, appears to have come from a 50s sock hop, and the other one is Radish from fucking Final Exam. Like, I never thought I would ever see Radish again, but here he is. He's been in one of these movies and they don't even show it. It's got a knife through the trampoline thing, like from Thanksgiving. I mean, I haven't seen the movie Thanksgiving. I'm assuming that
the fake trailer Thanksgiving.
Yeah. We only covered the fake trailer because, you know, I'm not dealing with that fucking guy. I didn't have all the information back then.
I want to put out a challenge to the fans of the Kill by Kill podcast. Patrick, sure. And I'm guessing, Gina, you're on board that a lot of great films were left out. A lot of, 70s and early 80s films are left out. It is entirely possible for an ambitious young editor to go ahead and re-edit Terror in the Isles, the fan cut, so we can get what we're missing from the current version. So if somebody wants to take that on, I'm not even saying the whole movie, just take a sequence and put in some of the movies you feel like are not represented. When they're talking about people being vulnerable and naked, let's see part of the 9-minute sex scene between Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. Go for it.
I mean, you could taking out, all the Nighthawks scene, taking out all the Vice Squad scenes, taking out all the Kloot scenes for some reason. You could just, fill those in with the movies they mysteriously left out.
I've worked with Topher Grace a couple of times. Maybe I reach out to the man, a guy known for great re-edits. Would he be interested in tackling Terror in the Isles, the great American classic in its 40th anniversary? Would you edit in some stuff from Prom Night in here finally?
And he'd be like, what movie?
Yeah, like, how is The Thing in here? Well, I know why The Thing is in here, because it's a Universal movie. But, not have anything from Christine. It seems a little wild to me, some of the choices. But I know they were made from necessity. They weren't like, hey, we're going to work all of this around Nighthawks. It just feels like they are doing all this around Nighthawks.
Like, some of it makes sense. Like, there's a whole sequence where they're talking about suspense. And so they put in the scene in Midnight Express where he is trying to go through the security gate. And that's a pretty good example of suspense. Is Midnight Express a terror film? No. But I mean, if you say, give me an example of suspense, fine. That's a reasonable example.
Yeah. And I'll also say, Brad Davis looks like he's carrying drugs. He is not a cool
I mean, he's sweating like Ted Stryker.
He is up against some of the oddest looking character actors in the world in that sequence, and he looks way weirder. He just looks like, please don't ask me about all the drugs I've taped to my body. He is a bad choice to bring drugs to America.
Like, because back then I knew, even 13 years old, that would be me if I tried to smuggle drugs into the country.
Well, it would have been weird to have a young girl sweating that much in a Turkish airport. That would have raised suspicions. Kevin.
He was busted for smuggling 50 pounds of cocaine across the border. Your Honor, it was 10 pounds of cocaine, 40 pounds of sweat.
It just expanded the cocaine.
That cocaine has no street value. No, It's just
It's pure
sweaty
liquid, Your
cocaine,
Honor.
sweat drenched drugs.
Have you ever tried to really light up black tar heroin when it's full of Brad Davis's sweat? It's not the experience you want. It's been a while since I've seen Nighthawks, but Rutger Hauer's before photo, you know, when he's blowing up a department store, and they're like, what would he look like with a different face? And their concept is he's got a beard and he's definitely been puffy.
Do you know what it reminded me of? Rewatching it. Do you remember it was the Kids in the Hall sketch where it was the cops and they're trying to find a guy and it's the guy standing right next to him, right next to them, but they have the well, here's what he looks like, but here's what he might look like now, and it's the same face, just got a mustache. It's the exact thing. It just reminded me of that so much.
It's like they say, if he's changed his face, he's the most dangerous man on earth. And you look at it, it's like, I don't know, maybe he didn't go on a 72-hour bender before he flew into New York and shaved. That's it. He's not demonstrably different looking.
He like vaguely changed accents. That's all. That's all we know about him.
Wow. What a motion picture, Nighthawks. The other thing about the TV cut, which I got about halfway through, I couldn't finish all of it due to time and work and whatnot. It's included on the Blu-ray from Scream Factory, which I appreciate. They changed the "Isn't it cool to be in a movie audience" theme, and then they make it like movies. How are they made? And you're like, what the fuck is this shit? Why do we have a 5-minute prologue of guys in trucks with cranes and prop masters? And then it's like, okay, we've done enough of this shit. Let's start up Terror in the Aisles. And then what they replace half the stuff with is legitimately more hardcore. They have a full kill sequence from Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. Not Rope. The one in Britain. Frenzy. Alfred Hitchcock's Frenzy. They have a full kill scene in which he's strangling a woman with a tie. And you're like, why is this allowed on television? Why is this okay? But an exploding head is not.
I mean, Frenzy's great because you've got one of the all-time, oh my God, I hope when I'm found dead, I'm not making that face.
You just got Al behind the camera going, I think she could be uglier. Yeah, have you ever seen a Goofy cartoon? One of those.
I do like his sequence where he's like, there's a bomb under that. Get rid of it.
He is kind of, Alfred Hitchcock is kind of the third host. It's kind of a cheat.
Well, Universal had so much footage of him because after doing this is the studio guide in me coming out. So it's obviously filmed in his production office on the bank line. And they have so much footage of him like talking about shit because at a certain point he would talk about his movies, but he was so afraid to make another one because he just did not want to fail. And so he would just, anyone who had a camera or a pen, he would just go off. But he was also afraid to meet Steven Spielberg. He's like, no, that guy made Jaws. There's no way I can fucking talk to him. Are you kidding me? But he was a weird guy. Let it be said. Is there anyone else? There's so many people almost sipping a Coke in this movie. They get right up so close to touching a straw to their mouth, but they've obviously been told no one wants to see you actually sip.
Or like we're just afraid we're going to get like sipping noises caught on the on the audio. Yeah, they're kind of like, oh, there's something in there, kind of moving away from their mouths.
Yeah, by the time they actually took a sip, it was like flat and warm. You know, the exact experience that you want. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about this movie that we need to discuss?
I didn't know, honestly, that there was a more or less different version made for television. I didn't know it was that. I mean, I figured there was like a cut version, but not with a whole different sequence and all that. That's very interesting.
Well, in order to make time for television, it has to be a certain length. And while this version would, even if you just put it on television, the theatrical version now, you would still need to add stuff to it in order to make time to fill out a 2-hour block. So that's kind of the big deal with TV edits, why you sometimes get something different, why they had to film extra stuff for the original Halloween during production of Halloween 2 in order to get it on NBC, because otherwise it wouldn't be long enough.
All this talk about the TV cut makes me want to bring up something that occurred to me. The nature of this film is talking about terror film, suspense, horror. Would it have tainted the movie if they included some of the 1970s greatest made-for-TV movies? Or at the time in 1984, did cinephiles look down at your Salem's Lot, Night Stalker, Dark Night of the Scarecrow? Oh my God, what's the one with the Kim Darby one? Is it called
Don't Be Afraid of the Dark?
Don't Be Afraid of the Dark.
The movie that, again, scared me at 4:00 in the afternoon in Newport Beach, California.
Could you have put some of those in the TV cut, or does that require a different movie? Because the rules that they're mapping out in Terror in the Isles, do the same rules not apply to made-for-TV horror?
I think you could have gotten away with it in the TV cut. I don't know that it would have ruined the purity of it. I think the purity is debatable in and of itself. So you definitely could have done it with Salem's Lot, a movie we'll be talking, or I don't know what it is, a TV miniseries that we'll be talking about next week, because it was shown theatrically overseas. So, most of the world saw it on a movie screen before they saw it on a TV. Everything else, I don't know. You're already showing it on television. Some of the illusion is gone.
Yeah.
And they've changed the theme of it so much to be about this, like, that's entertainment. This is how you make a movie, everybody. And everyone's tone suddenly shifts.
I do think that you said that, was there like, the idea that made for TV horror was somewhat less than. I think probably to a certain extent that was true. You back around when Terror in the Isles came out, and certainly, when you look back later, like, oh wait, no, that was actually really good, and they did really well with the limits of what they could show, on now, of course, it's pretty much no holds barred. You can, very much show, I think in terms of like The Walking Dead, and I actually stopped watching The Walking Dead, predominantly because there was no dramatic stakes. They're just don't get attached to these characters. We're going to kill them off eventually. But also it was like, okay, this is a little over the top at this point. It's like I don't know. It's just so yeah, I think nowadays you can't make the argument that made for TV horror is not as impactful. But, yeah, I can definitely see where there would have been like horror snobs thinking that, it wasn't as good or wasn't the same as things that were coming out in the theater.
It's possible. I mean, the rating system was so different back then in terms of the difference between a PG and an R had more to do with its themes than it did with violence or gore or nudity even. It was a different time. And listen, if we playing by the rules of kill by kill, there aren't any on-screen deaths that we can choose our own death venture from, because the characters we're really focused on are these audience members. And unfortunately, despite all of my headcanon, none of them die in a grisly way. We get a lot of...
I mean, we can assume that sunglasses guy killed at least one of them in the parking lot. He's hiding under someone's car and ready to slash his Achilles tendons.
Yeah, someone's probably getting bunked just through a theater seat. We just don't see it.
Yes.
But that brings us to plugs. Go to joshhouse.com for all of your artwork needs in terms of podcasting and more. Go to Revenge Body Memphis at bandcamp.com for this theme and all of our remixes. Go to our Patreon for lots of fun extras that you will enjoy listening to if you like this show. Now, Kevin, what have you got going on? I know you're doing a lot of different stuff. Why don't you tell people where they can find you out there on the World Wide Webs?
You can find some of my videos on lovekevin.com. LOVEKEVIN.com is my website. It has lots of good videos. I'm just going to throw out a couple of things I wrote in notes that we didn't cover.
Sure.
So number one, they show a fantastic clip in Terror in the Isles. They show a fantastic clip from Jaws 2 where Eddie is in the water and Tina's shouting for him. I found out recently, do you know who auditioned for that part?
No.
Christopher Knight, Peter Brady from the Brady Bunch. And I just had to share that. I'm trying to really pick and choose what I bring to the table. And it was like, well, that's something I have to share.
That is a kill by kill detail.
Podcast.
That is something we need to know, because I've long argued that is the one sequence in Jaws 2 that you could just take out and put into Jaws and no one would think any less of it. Yeah. But if Peter Brady was in it, that's a problem.
Yeah, it really would not age the same way.
No.
Another thing I noticed watching it this time was how much when characters in John Carpenter's The Thing talk about The Thing, how much it sounds like AI. It's like, it doesn't create anything new. It just imitates. Yeah, these aren't dogs. It's a fabrication of dogs. It's what it thinks a dog looks like. I'm like, oh my God, this is AI. They're talking about AI. And it's just like in the world of The Thing, there's like, if you had to write a resume, you could just ask The Thing to do it for you. The Thing is great. Embrace the
He's
Thing.
in the middle of transforming into a dog. He's got plenty of bandwidth for your resume.
So I like the idea that The Thing is not seen as a threat. It's being embraced. That's the ultimate.
It's very helpful. It makes your job so much easier before it turns your head into a spider.
Yeah. Everyone's going to be using The Thing. Don't get left out. And then I'll just tell you my personal connection with this film is that after, watching it however many times, I realized as a young viewer, I had said at one point, one of my life goals is to see all of the movies they feature in Terror in the Isles. So I made a list of the remaining movies that I hadn't seen. I had 22 movies to go back in 2019. So I tracked down, I got The Ghost Breakers, Scared Stiff, Frenzy, all of them. And it was great. I really felt like I accomplished something. I did make the choice. I am not going to watch all the movies in It Came From Hollywood because I'm not that hardcore. No. But then the third thing for listeners who enjoy a good checklist, who like giving yourself a challenge, a much more achievable one is all of the science fiction films mentioned in Science Fiction Double Feature. The opening song from the Rocky Horror Picture Show is only 11 films long. So that's totally doable. And then I don't know the film count on this, but for your horror fans who listen to this, who are probably our age, all of the movies featured in the Fright Flicks trading cards, which we've probably all seen most of. Although we know it as Pumpkinhead, not Vengeance the Demon.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom threw all those away. I had them in a box in the garage with a lot of comic books that could have been very valuable. And she's like, I don't know, you went off to college. I figure you didn't need them.
Well, these belong to the devil now.
These belong in a landfill. You don't have emotional attachments to these things. Gotta get them out. Not great. But you have a lot of great YouTube stuff too. that I really
the
enjoy.
Atomic Abe channel is a great spot to see some stuff I'm making with Nick Nadell. We do a lot of different kinds of content. How do you like that? We do videos that are usually media about media. We focus on like backdoor pilots and failed spinoffs, and there's a couple of videos in there about movies and comparing movies and a little bit of stuff about horror movies. We did one video that you guys would like where I think it's sitcom characters killed in sitcom actors killed in horror movies, where it's a roundup of like the top 20, and it's very much a list piece. The audience that we're getting on the Atomic Abe channel likes stuff about TV, doesn't like stuff about movies. So we don't do as many videos about movies because the algorithm doesn't serve it up to the audience. Sorry, that's a little too behind the curtain inside baseball for you, but it's the truth. We got a couple of Kevin Geeks Out shows coming to Nighthawk Cinema. So if you go to lovekevin.com, just click on the section for Kevin Geeks Out. We've got a show coming up at the end of October that's going to be looking at TV terror, which is why I was asking about, the made for TV horror versus theatrical horror. That's going to be a lot of fun. It's co-hosted by Ken Reed. Got some big shows coming up in December because I published I'm going to call it a picture book, not a children's book, because much like Stacy Keach says in Road Games, just because I drive a truck doesn't make me a truck driver. Just because I wrote a children's book doesn't make me a children's book author. I never used that moniker. I wrote a book that was released as a picture book that the publishers thought was not an adult humor book. It was a book for kids. I disagree, but anyway, with Santa Doesn't Need Your Help, the book, every December I have to bang this drum, and I'm going to be doing some Christmas shows and some events with Glenn Heroy, as a guy he's been playing Santa Claus for over 40 years, and he has a great show that I directed, and he tells stories about being Santa, and it's a lot of fun. So we're going to be staging that in a couple of places.
Excellent.
So yeah, lovekevin.com for all your Kevin Maher needs.
Yes,
as if that's something that exists.
Well, it's not like our audience wouldn't be interested, as Gina has been a part of several, and people that we've had on the show as guests have been involved. Kenneth Reed has been on the show, so there's lots to say about the content that you make, and I enjoy it very much. I highly recommend it.
Oh, thank you so much,
Gina. Where can people find you on these here?
I even recommend the stuff that I was not involved in. So
there you go.
There you go. I don't have as much to promote right now. I have mostly been focusing on my Substack, in which I talk about movies and television and pop culture. That's just Gina Watches Things.substack.com. And I am on most social medias under Gina Does Things.
Do it today, people. Check it out. Don't worry, folks. The body count will continue. Next week, we will be discussing, as I just let it tumble out of my mouth, not that we've recorded it yet, we'll be discussing the 1979 version of Salem's Lot in anticipation of whatever the fuck the 2024 version of Salem's Lot is going to be. But we're going to talk about them both eventually, everybody. Don't worry, folks. The body count will continue. For myself, for Gina, and for Kevin. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.